Hey, what's up, guys? 98 Sports Talk here. Don't forget to sub and turn on your notifications. That way you don't miss any SEC football talk here on the channel. Doing a playlist of each nightmare scenario for all the SEC teams, so be sure to check those out if you're interested. This one here is South Carolina, obviously, so let's get into this. And, I really don't like to talk about injuries as far as nightmare scenarios go, but I think I got to mention this one in South Carolina's case, and that's Deebo Samuel. So, I mean, to me, he's really the key to their whole season, I think, and that's why if we're going to talk about a nightmare scenario, it's a scenario where Deebo Samuel actually gets injured and doesn't play the rest of the season. Which, again, if I was talking about some other random team, let's just say, and somebody that did not have an injury history, I wouldn't mention it. But since Deebo Samuel does have a big time injury history, I gotta mention it. I mean, it's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about South Carolina's season coming up. I mean, he's got to stay healthy. If he doesn't, I think it's really puts South Carolina in a bind and really just kind of ruins their season. I think if South Carolina's got any shot at all to make it to Atlanta and the SEC championship game, he's got to stay healthy the entire season. So that's kind of the number one thing that could go wrong during the season for South Carolina. There's a couple other things too as well. South Carolina is thin on both sides of the ball on the offensive and defensive lines. So again, I don't like to talk about injuries, but hey, it is what it is here. If you're thin in a position, similar to kind of LSU in the secondary, something like that, you don't want to have any injuries on the lines for South Carolina. That could turn into if that does happen, then South Carolina's season will take a turn for the worse as well. Another thing that could happen to kind of derail South Carolina's season is really the offense, and that's been Will Muschamp's knock, I guess. He had great defenses at Florida and seems to be putting together a pretty solid defense in Columbia. But if he can't kind of get that offense going, if Jake Bentley has another kind of really lackluster season, then that's one thing that could lead to South Carolina just racking up a couple losses. And we'll see how this new up-tempo offense is going to do for the Gamecocks. Who knows? Will they crank it out against Georgia in the second game of the season? I don't know. I'm imagining they will. I don't know why they wouldn't if they've been practicing that during spring. So we'll see. That's something that potentially could go wrong as well. Let's get into I want to give you guys a prediction on kind of a win-loss record for South Carolina's worst nightmare scenario. I'm thinking nightmare scenario probably 7-6. You're looking at losses to Georgia and Clemson. I'm kind of booking those. Obviously, South Carolina could beat Georgia. You never know. It's a home game. It's gonna be a tough game. Big time crowd, big time atmosphere there. But I'm gonna book those two losses. Could in a nightmare scenario, you're talking about losses to Florida, Tennessee, or Ole Miss. I can't see them losing both, but could lose one of those. Could lose to Texas A&M, Missouri, Kentucky could be a surprise team in the East. Don't get me wrong here. I'm not saying Kentucky's going to win the East, but I think Kentucky could have a chance to be a pretty good team this season. So I think 7-6 is worst case scenario based on what South Carolina's schedule is. That being said, schedule is pretty favorable. So I think South Carolina is set up to have a good season. But in a nightmare scenario on this one, I think 7-6 is definitely the floor for South Carolina. But let me know what you guys think down in the comment section. And again, don't forget to sub and turn on your notifications. And I'll see you in the next video.